Hello, my name's Aviva, and today I wanted to share with you my favorite books that I have read from each month so far this year. So at the time that I'm making this video, it is currently Monday, July 4th. So we are just at the halfway point of the year, and I have read 147 books so far. So out of that 147, I'm going to be sharing with you 16 of my favorites. And how I chose these books was I basically looked at what I read each month, and then I chose 2 to 3 of my favorites from that grouping. So that's kind of how we're going to do today's video. We're going to start off with January, and then we're going to go from there. And because I'm doing it that way, I'm going to try and not give you too much of an explanation about what any of these books are about or why they made it into this video or anything like that. Like, obviously I love them for a reason. And instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a playlist for my monthly wrap-ups linked in the description below. So if you wanted to look into any of these books a little bit more and hear more of my thoughts about them, then you could just check what month I read them in and then go and watch that month's wrap-up video. So yeah, with that said, I also quickly wanted to mention that I have been doing a lot of rereads this year, and I'm not going to be mentioning any of those in today's video because all of my rereads were from my favorites of 2021 list. So I'll have that video for you linked down below as well in case you wanted to check out what my favorite books from last year were. So with that said, let's just jump straight into January. The first book I'm sharing with you is Voyeur by Fiona Cole. So this is actually the first book that I read in January of 2021, and I ended up giving it a 5 stars. I absolutely loved it at the time that I read it. It is a teacher-student forbidden romance, and it might have an age gap, but honestly, I can't really remember. But either way, this girl needed money for her college tuition. So she ends up getting a job at this sex club where this guy happens to be a member at, and he goes there and he starts to really like her. So it's kind of like a guy falls first situation. She doesn't even know who he is at the time. And basically she's going to walk into the first day of classes and he is going to end up being her teacher. So he is going to realize who she is. She isn't going to realize who he is. And then they're going to end up having a forbidden teacher-student relationship with a sex club sort of setting. So I very much loved this book. Highly recommend checking it out if you're into forbidden, taboo sort of romances. But anyway, after that in January, I also read From Lukov with Love by Mariana Zapata, which I absolutely loved. I think I've read like 9 books by her by now, and this is definitely like on my top 3 favorites of all time from her. So this is an enemies to lovers slow burn romance with a bit of a, maybe it's a grumpy or a reverse grumpy sunshine. I don't really remember, but I'm pretty sure she is the grump and he might be the sunshine. But either way, this is about these 2 people who have known each other since they were very little. He is actually her best friend's brother, and they are both professional figure skaters and they've never gone along. And now one day they basically get set up to be partners for the next competition or something like that. And now they're going to have to work together. So it's forced proximity. There's a lot of banter, a lot of tension, everything along those lines. And it is a great time. If you're into slow burn romances, I highly recommend checking this one out. But anyway, in January, I also read the Mindfuck series by St. Abbey. So I feel like everybody was reading this in January and I was one of them. But either way, I really loved this at the time that I read it. So in this book, you're following this girl who is a serial killer, and she's going to end up having a romance with this guy who is like a profiler or an FBI agent, something along those lines. And he is on her case. So he's in the middle of tracking her down while also falling in love with her. So crazy situation, very Criminal Minds sort of vibes, like the Criminal Minds TV show. If you're into that sort of show and like that sort of vibe, then this book is basically a romance version of it, and I absolutely love this. This is very dark and twisted though, so you definitely have to look up trigger warnings for it, but if you're into that sort of stuff, then yeah, you should definitely check out the Mindfuck series if you haven't already. But anyway, that is it for January. So then in February, I ended up reading Terms and Conditions by Lauren Asher, and I absolutely loved this book. So this is a billionaire sort of romance. It's the second book in the Dreamland Billionaires companion series, and it's a marriage of convenience between this boss and his secretary. So it's got a lot of stuff going for it, and I really liked it. It's another one of those grumpy sunshines. Like, he is all about work. He really doesn't care about anything, but he basically has to get married in order to inherit his his title in the company. Like, he wants to become CEO and he has to get married to be able to get that job. So basically he's going to marry his secretary and it's going to be their romance, and I absolutely loved it. I think I've read 6 books by Lauren Asher so far, and this is definitely my favorite of hers, like by a long shot. So if you haven't read it yet, please check it out if you're into Marriage of Conveniences. But anyway, after this in February, I did also read Wait for It by Mariana Zapata. So this is another one of her slow burn romances, and this is a single parent type of trope. So you're following this girl who is actually guardians to her two nephews after her brother had died, and she basically took up guardianship of them. And now it's been like 2 years or so she's still getting the hang of being like a single mom of sorts, and she ends up moving to this new neighborhood, and she's going to meet her neighbor that lives across the street from her, and it's going to be their very slow burn romance. So really, really great time if you're into a single parent slow burn type of vibes. But anyway, in February, I also read another Marianne Zapata book, which was Luna and the Lie, and I absolutely loved this book. This is one of those boss to employee situations. This girl is working at a mechanic shop. She's gonna end up having a relationship with her boss, and it's another grumpy sunshine. It's another age gap, and it's got good vibes going for it. So if that sounds up your alley, please check this out, because I love Marianne Zapata, and this was definitely one of my favorites from her. But anyway, that is it for February. So then in March, I ended up also reading Waking Olivia by Elizabeth O'Rourke, and this is another forbidden romance. So this is a sports romance. You're following this girl who is in college, and she's on the track team, and she ends up having a forbidden relationship with one of her coaches. So the thing is that she has this issue of running in her sleep, and it's very dangerous, and it's actually very hard for her because she basically will get to track practice in the morning, and she's already like, worn down and everything because she ran miles in her sleep. And she kind of keeps this to herself, and then her coach basically notices that something's wrong. So he's going to end up getting all up in her business and trying to help her and stuff like that. So it's a very good sports romance if you're into that sort of like, forbidden coach to student sort of thing. And then also I would highly recommend looking up some trigger warnings for this, because this girl is going through a lot, and she has a lot of trauma that she's dealing with. And yeah, you should definitely look up some warnings for this before you go into it. But if you're cool with all of that sort of stuff, then this was a great read. But anyway, after this in March, I also read Ignite by Melanie Harlow. So this is technically like the 6th book in her Cloverleaf Farms companion series, but you could totally read it as a standalone. This is the first book that I actually read from this companion series, and it's a grumpy sunshine age gap single parent romance. So this guy is divorced, and he has these 2 twin girls, and he ends up moving to a new house, and next door this girl is living there, and he's going to meet her, and it's going to be their sort of romance. So she's a bunch of years younger than him, and it's a very good time. It's a bit steamy, and it also is like he's a firefighter, so it's got good vibes going around. So if you're into single parents and you're into age gaps, then I highly recommend checking this one out. But that was it for March. So in April, I also ended up picking up The Takeover by T.L. Swan. So this is the 2nd book in the Miles High Club companion series, and this is another single parent book where the girl is the single parent, and she also happens to be a couple of years older than the guy. So it's got a bit of a reverse age gap. And honestly, I'm not really into reverse age gaps, but because it was like only a couple of years, it didn't really bother me, but it was there. So I figured I'd mention it. But either way, I absolutely loved this book. It's another one of those like billionaire workplacey sort of vibes, because they kind of meet for the first time when he is trying to take over her company, and she like is very insulted by this. So they don't get along right away, and then they meet a couple of months later at this like work convention or something, and then that's when they're gonna get their chance. And then she's a single mom, so like her kids are very involved in the story, and like they try running this guy off, and like they pull pranks on him and everything like that. And it is honestly a really fun time. If you're into single parents and you want a really good laugh, then I highly recommend checking this one out. But anyway, yeah, that was April, right? And then in April, I also did read Forbidden by Carla Sorensen. So this is the 4th book in the Ward Sisters companion series, but it's the first one that I read in the series. So again, you can totally read them out of order. I really loved this when I read it, even though it was the last one in the series. And anyway, this is another one of those age gap, forbidden, age gap forbidden. I think maybe it's a Grumpy Sunshine. I don't really remember, but I do know it was something age gap forbidden and single parent. That's what it was. Age gap forbidden, single parent. This girl is working at a gym. She's the manager at a gym, and they basically just got a new owner who happens to be an ex-MMA fighter. So a bit of a sports romance as well. And basically this girl has had a crush on this guy since she was a kid. So yeah, it's very awkward for her to now be working with him as like him being her boss, and happens to be he's a widow, he's a single parent, and it's basically going to end up being their relationship. So it's workplace environment, it's got good vibes all around, and I absolutely loved this story. So Highly recommend checking it out if everything I just said sounds up your alley. But anyway, after this, I think it's May. Yeah, in May, I ended up picking up A Photo Finish by Elsie Silver, which is the second book in what series? It's the Gold Rush Ranch Companion series. So this book takes place on a horse ranch. It's very like small town vibes, and it's going to end up being another one of those grumpy sunshine situations with a damaged hero. This guy is dealing with a lot. He was in the military and he has like PTSD, and he's like, he's got a couple of stuff going on from his time there, and basically he's not in a good mood, and he ends up meeting this girl on an online forum after she posted a nude photo of herself, and they're going to end up like sparking up a friendship online. They're not really going to know who each other are though, and then basically like it's eventually going to come out, and like they're going to meet in person, they're going to realize who each other are, then they're kind of going to go their separate ways because like it ended badly or whatever. And then I forgot how long it is after, maybe like a year or so later, they're going to end up being on the same horse ranch together because she works there and he owns it, and they're going to end up in a forced proximity situation, and then it's going to be their romance. So very good vibes. I love a good damaged hero, and this guy was really messed up in a lot of ways, and why I loved this book was because I really liked how he had to fix himself, and he knew that he had to fix himself if he wanted to be with the girl. So you really got to see like that struggle in it. So yeah, I very much highly recommend checking out this book. I also read like the first book in this series and the third book in this series this year, and this one was definitely my favorite by far. So yeah, very good book if it sounds, up your alley. But either way, if it's not up your alley, it was still a good book for me, But anyway, yeah, after this one, I also read, I think we're still in May, I read The Birthday List by Devney Perry. So this was an amazing story. You're following this girl who her husband was murdered like 5 years ago, and she's still trying to grieve him and move on from her loss. And one way that she's doing that is by completing the bucket list that he had made for himself before he passed away. So one day when she is like in the middle of completing one of his tasks, like as a way to grieve him and like move on from him, basically she runs into the cop that was there for her the night that her husband died. Like he was the one who told her that her husband was murdered, and they're basically it's going to be their romance, and he's going to offer to help her complete this bucket list. So you're kind of going to watch as she's still grieving her husband and also trying to move on, and at the same time she's completing his bucket list with the guy that she is now falling for like in the present day. So lots of good vibes going on because it's got that playful bucket list vibe, but also, the seriousness of like the grieving situation. So I really, really enjoyed this book when I read it. Again, I'd highly recommend it, obviously, because it's in this video. But anyway, that was it for May. So then in June, I picked up Consider Me by Becca Max. So this is one of those I was a player until I met you sports romances. It's very like off-campus vibes. Like if you're a fan of Off Campus by Elle Kennedy, this book would be super up your alley. This guy is basically a pro hockey player, and he sleeps around all the time. He's very well known for it, and one day he's at a party, he sees this girl, and this girl isn't into that type of guy, so she basically turns him down, and then he doesn't want to take no for an answer, so he's going to chase after her, and then it's going to be their romance. So I absolutely loved this story. Very addictive. This is definitely one of like my favorite book boyfriends of the year so far. So yeah, definitely recommend checking this out if you're into like off-campus sports romance vibes. But anyway, after this in May, I also read Focus by Carla Sorensen, which is the first book in the Ward Sisters companion series. So I already mentioned Forbidden by Carla Sorensen, fourth book in this series, and this is the first book. So in this book, you're following this guy who is a pro football player, and he is extremely focused on the game. Ever since college, he's been like, basically celibate. He doesn't really get involved with girls or anything like that. He just wants to be the best at football. And one day he gets traded to a new team, and that is when he runs into a girl from his past that he had known from his college days that actually almost got him in trouble and is the reason why he's decided to be celibate and just focus on football. And she happens to be working at the place that his new team is at. And it's going to be kind of like a workplace environment, forced proximity situation because they're going to be working on a project together. So yeah, very, very good time. I really loved this book because you kind of got to see him turn from like extremely focused on football to all of a sudden like this girl comes into his life, and then all of a sudden like his priorities change and like he's falling for a girl and caring less about football. So I loved that type of transition, and that is why I absolutely loved this story. So highly recommend checking it out if it sounds up your alley. But anyway, in in June, sorry, I keep getting confused, but in June, I also read A Million Kisses in Your Lifetime by Monica Murphy. So this is a good girl, bad boy situation. It's set in a private, like fancy high school. And this girl is like the prude of this school. Like she's very known to like be celibate. She wears a purity ring, everything like that. But she's also like the most popular girl in school. And then she's gonna end up having a romance with the popular bad boy in school who happens to be like kind of weirdly like obsessed with her. So it's a guy falls first, a guy falls harder, and then one day they're basically going to get set up to be like partners on a project, and that's how like they're going to get set up to like have to work with each other, forced proximity thing, and then obviously they're going to fall for each other. Well, she's gonna fall for him because he's already fallen for her. But either way, really great story. Absolutely loved it. Like really, this one was one that I didn't think I was gonna love as much as I did, and then I really was blown away by it. So this is one of those books that kind of gets better as it goes. So if you're not even into it in the beginning, just like keep going, because honestly, like it builds up on each other. And by the end of it, I was like absolutely obsessed with like this guy. So definitely a favorite book boyfriend of the year so far. So yeah, highly recommend this one. And then happens to be, because it's already July 4th, I did end up reading a couple of books in July and I found a new favorite. So I'm just gonna like quickly add it in. And that book is Binding 13 by Chloe Walsh. So this is the first book in a duet. So you definitely do have to read the second book to get like your happily ever after. This one does end up on a cliffhanger, and I'm just gonna say now, I did enjoy book 1 way more than I enjoyed book 2, but I still really loved the story overall, and it's definitely a favorite. So in this book, you're following this loner girl who was being very heavily bullied in her previous school. So her parents decide to pull her out and put her in a private school. And that is where she's going to meet the popular guy in the school that also happens to be a rugby prodigy. And it's going to end up being their romance. So it was a really, really, really good story, but it was also very, very heavy. You're dealing with a lot of trigger warnings like abuse, bullying, anxiety, suicidal thoughts. There are very, very heavy topics going on in this story. And I do highly recommend looking a little bit into it before you decide to like randomly pick it up. But I absolutely loved this story. Like just the way that it was all built up on itself, like the way that it was like a slow burn, like because it is like a dual book, like you don't even get the couple to finally be together until the end of this book. And then book 2 is basically them navigating their relationship and also like the aftermath of what happened by the end of this book. So very, very slow burn. And that is actually kind of why I loved book 1 more than I loved book 2, because I like a build-up more than the navigation. So book 1 was like absolutely my favorite because the way that it all built itself up was absolutely amazing. And then book 2 was just like, them dealing with like a budding relationship. So I'm just not so into that. And that is one of the many reasons why I liked book 2 less, but I still really, really loved the series as a whole. So I am very last minute adding this into my favorite list of the year so far this year. So yeah, with that said, that is all of my favorite books that I have read out of the 147 books that I have read from January up until July 4th. So let me know what your favorite books of the year so far are, because I love to get some good recommendations. I always love to hear people's favorite books. So leave me a comment down below, and also give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed watching it. Also subscribe to my channel if you're not already subscribed. But either way, thank you so much for taking the time to watch my video. I hope you enjoyed it. And either way, with that said, yeah, until next time, enjoy reading.